promise that I won't start strumming myself when I talk about the Duke of Wellington. Welcome to History of London, where I bring the funnies and the salacious gossip as I talk to you guys about all things raunchy, grisly, and plain bizarre from the past. Before I dive into the ultimate showdown between two of history's greatest enemies, please do feel free to subscribe to my channel and follow my TikTok and my Instagram for more scandalous historical content. These will be linked below alongside my merch line, Hot Historians, my tours, and my best-selling history book, A Ghostly Guide to London. Depending on who you ask, Napoleon is either the greatest military leader of all time, or he was a little man with a very fragile ego. Funnily enough, Napoleon wasn't actually short. He was between 5'6" and 5'8", which was actually a pretty reasonable height back then. And the reason why people think he was so dinky is because he was often seen standing beside the Imperial Guard, who were usually around 6 foot plus. So they made him appear itty-bitty in comparison. However, his John Thomas is another story altogether. Here we have Napoleon's knob, measuring in at just 1.5 inches. It was allegedly lopped off by his doctor during autopsy in front of 17 witnesses. It fell into the hands, not literally I hope, of the priest that read him his last rites, and it passed through his family until it was bought by a rare books collector in the 1920s. And then in 1927, it went on display at the Museum of French Art in New York, where onlookers famously described it as resembling a shriveled grape. Finally, it was bought by an American neurologist who purchased it for $3,000, which in today's money would amount to around 16 grand. With a willy that size, it is no surprise that Napoleon was a munch. You may recall this letter to Josephine, informing her that he would be home from campaign in 3 days and requesting for her not to wash. Some very silly sausages have been claiming that this was so that he could see if she had been cheating on him. Frankly, if you believe this, the best part of you dripped down your mother's leg. Because cheating or no cheating, that coochie is going to stink like a 3-week-old slice of ham if you're not washing. The fact of the matter is, Napoleon was just a man who loved the musk. He would have loved Disco Minge. Fact. And he really loved Josephine. He was obsessed with her, so much so that he even nicknamed her Muff, Baron de Keppen. But sadly for Napoleon, Josephine was a massive scared. She cheated on him just weeks after their wedding, leading to Napoleon, upon finding out, embarking upon 22 love affairs. However, he wasn't always this randy. Napoleon was once a nervous virgin, and he popped his cherry in a French brothel, which historian and all-round Napoleon expert Andrew Roberts described as being a particularly mucky experience. Napoleon attempted to lose his V-card with 3 different prostitutes on 3 separate occasions before finally succeeding with the 4th. When he picked her up in a particularly seedy Paris district, which was renowned for its sex trade, he began quizzing her, like a HR survey, on how much she liked her job. Exasperated, she just told him to get on with the matter at hand. Wellington, meanwhile, was referred to throughout Europe as the rutting stag. And for good reason. Arthur Wellesley was Anglo-Irish and he came from an upper-middle-class family. So the upper crusts of English society wanted nothing to do with him. They considered him Irish, but the Irish considered him English, and the English thought he was a bit of a pleb. This was also the view that was taken by the family of the woman he was besotted by, Kitty Pakenham, and they refused to allow him to take her hand in marriage. That is, of course, until a friend of him very kindly bought him a commission into the British Army, and Wellesley went off to India, where he helped defeat Tipu, the despot who committed horrific atrocities against Hindus and Christians. Upon his return, all of a sudden, Kitty's family wanted to know, and he was thrilled. They got married, and then Arthur Wellesley was hit with the realisation that actually Kitty was a bit thick. Wellington loved intelligent, accomplished women, and his list of mistresses included opera singers, actresses, and authors. He claimed that trying to speak to Kitty about current affairs and matters of importance was like trying to speak Hebrew to her. And if that wasn't bad enough, on the day of his wedding, he said to his brother, "By Jove, she's gotten ugly." Because in all fairness, they hadn't seen each other in 12 years. And you know, old Welly was a bit of a catch. He was an avid reader, an excellent horseman, he could speak 3 languages, and he prided himself on keeping fit. This man could also function for weeks at a time with no sleep, famously napping for just 48 hours during a 14-day campaign. And of course, he was bloody gorgeous. So gorgeous, in fact, that I am hoping that the Guards Museum will allow me to clone him from the lock of hair that they have on display. But poor Kitty, she really did love him, and just before they married in 1806, she wrote him a letter explaining that she didn't think she was going to be a very good companion to him. And sadly, she was right. Arthur wanted a pretty, glamorous socialite on his arm, a social butterfly. But Kitty had been raised by a very boring and sensible Calvinist mother who instilled values of modesty and humility into her. So while Kitty pined at home with her crochet, utterly miserable, refusing to wear these opulent silks and jewels, Arthur Wellesley was racking up mega bills at the brothel. Just before he was sent to Spain to humiliate Napoleon, the Duke of Wellington was charged £55 and 13 shillings, which comes to a whopping £7,000 today, for 15 visits to the brass house. I don't know about Kitty, but I wouldn't be having that. His testicles would be in a jam jar after that little performance. Now, the Iron Duke did not only batter Napoleon on the battlefield at Wellington, he also completely destroyed him in bed. And I'm not talking about enemies to lovers. He went on to seduce 2 of Napoleon's mistresses, 1 actress and 1 opera singer. The actress, known as Madame Georges, was questioned on who was better in bed, Napoleon or the Duke of Wellington, and she responded that the Iron Duke was by far the stronger. Could you imagine being utterly humbled in battle and sent off and exiled to St. Helena, only then to find out that the man who humiliated you has then gone on to absolutely rag two of your women into the mattress. And one of them said that he was better at it than you were. Even after Kitty's death and 2 stints as the Prime Minister, the Duke of Wellington still remained an absolute hit with the ladies. How he didn't catch syphilis is a miracle in itself, because he was throwing one up 2 of Lord Byron's mistresses, and he was absolutely rumoured to have a touch of the pox. At the grand old age of 77, Angela Burdett Coutts, who was only 32 years old, was desperate to marry him because, you know, he was a silver fox in manner of Sergeant Wilson from Dad's Army. But Wellington declined, advising her not to throw herself away on a man who was old enough to be her grandfather. Damn, so Wellington had game even in his 70s. And while Napoleon and Wellington had very vivid sex lives and a lot of mistresses, the little slithers of information that we do possess suggests that the Duke of Wellington was a better shag. Maybe I'm biased because I'm English and I want to climb into his tomb at St. Paul's Cathedral and gyrate upon his pelvis. What do you guys think? Drop a comment below and let me know which historical figure's sex life I should dive into next.